ready to start broadcast? Okay, there we go. Yep. I guess we're good to go now. Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending today on Zoom and on Facebook to our Ramadan series about studying law in the US. I'd like to welcome.
Sorry, I think we haven't gone live. Merit, can you please make sure that the thing is live? It still says preparing.
We're broadcasting. We're live on Zoom.
But we aren't live on Facebook.
Okay. Okay, so everybody here on Zoom, thank you for your patience. We're just waiting one more minute. Is it just a black screen for you, Shaza?
Sorry, it just says preparing right now. Let me also check Facebook. Yeah. Nope. It's okay. I'll just push this on my end. It's fine. You guys are live? Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to our Ramadan series. Today's topic is studying law in the US. Thank you for joining us on Zoom and on Facebook. I'd also like to welcome our panelists, Jessica Dworkin from the Stetson University College of Law and Miki Hamstra from Indiana University's Robert H. McKinney School of Law. Just a quick intro to Education USA. We are your official source on US higher education in Pakistan. We have 3 offices in Karachi, Islamabad, and Lahore, but are available remotely to anyone in Pakistan looking to apply for higher education to the US for an undergraduate degree, a postgraduate degree, or even an associate's degree. All of our advising is free of cost, and all our advisors are US graduates themselves. So we exist to help you through the application process. It's nitty gritty. We aid in understanding and making college lists and understanding what the US has to offer and how certain programs available there are different than what you expect when you're coming from Pakistan, starting from, coming from a more British style system, which is one really big example of which is the law. So just going to pass it over to our panelists, and thank you once again.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Jessica Dworkin, and I'm here from Stetson Law School. I'm joined with Miki Hamstra from Indiana University McKinney School of Law, and we're really happy to be speaking with you this afternoon. So what we'd like to do is discuss a little bit just about an introduction to the U.S. legal system, and then how you might think about selecting the right program, what the general application process is like, and then we'll both briefly introduce the 2 schools that we represent. Okay, so we're going to start with an introduction to the US law system. So in the United States, unlike in most other parts of the world, law is actually a postgraduate degree. Our law schools are accredited by an organization called the American Bar Association. There are about 200 accredited law schools in the United States. Each of us represent one of these accredited law schools. Law schools can be either private or public. In terms of the quality of education, private and public don't really indicate anything about that, so you shouldn't be too worried about whether or not they're private or public. it's really an indication of the funding source of the law school. So public law schools receive some of their funding from government dollars within the United States, and private law schools are self-funded. And so you might see some differences reflected in tuition prices, but those could be balanced out by scholarships and other factors. And we'll get into more detail about that a little bit later in the presentation. In order to be considered for a US law school, you have to have an undergraduate degree, and it can be in any field. So I know many of you may have thought about studying law in college, and you're interested now in postgraduate. In the US law schools, that undergraduate degree could be in anything. And in order to actually practice as a lawyer, you have to have a law degree, and then you have to pass an exam, a licensing exam called the bar exam. There are different degree types that universities offer within the United States. And so I want to briefly discuss what those different kinds of degrees are to get a better sense for you of which one you might be interested in. So sort of the law degree that people often think about in the United States when they talk about going to law school would be the JD. The JD is the first postgraduate law degree that an American lawyer would receive in their legal training. So they have a university degree in some other field, and then they come to get their Juris Doctor, which is typically a 3-year degree. In some schools, you may be able to complete that degree in 2 years or in 4 years, depending on the particulars of the program that are offered. And most states require that you have a JD, often from an ABA accredited law school, in order to sit for their bar exam and gain licensure. The next type of degree that's offered at a US law school is called an LLM, or a Master of Laws. This is often the most popular degree for our international students. This is, again, a postgraduate law degree. For this degree, your first degree needs to be in law, as opposed to being in anything for the JD. The LLM degree is a legal specialization, allowing you to focus on a particular area of law, whether that's a practice area like business law or company law or environmental law, or it could just be something a little bit broader like the US legal system, American law. It's really designed for foreign trained lawyers, and typically this program is completed in 1 year. In addition, we have programs called MJs or MLSs. They're the same, but different schools use different names for them. The MJ is also typically a 1-year postgraduate law degree, but the difference between this and the LLM is that the MJ is for people who do not have prior education in the law, so they don't have a first degree in law, and the MJ does not lead to licensure. It doesn't qualify students to take a bar exam in most jurisdictions. Finally, we have degrees called SJDs. This is really like a PhD in law. This is a traditional doctoral program in law. It's a research-based program, and this program typically takes 3 to 5 years to complete, depending upon the program and your diligence in getting your dissertation and your other research work done. Wonderful. So one of the really cornerstones, I would say, of US legal education, one of the things that set our legal education apart from many other systems in the world is something that we call experiential learning, which means you learn by doing. So we certainly have classes where you would attend lectures and listen to professors and engage in really interesting and stimulating intellectual conversations, but we also do a lot of experiential learning, learning by doing. These can take the forms of clinics where you represent actual clients under the supervision of a faculty member, or internships or externships where you're actually doing legal work for an organization or some sort of legal group, or simulation courses where you may not have real clients, but you are actually going through all of the parts of a real legal issue, whether it's an argument or building a business or something like that, and you're simulating things. And through all of these things, you're learning by doing, not just by listening. It's one of, I think, and I think Miki would agree, one of the most enjoyable parts of a US legal education. It allows you to really learn deeply, to understand issues in ways you might not otherwise, and also to engage really meaningfully with your faculty and with the legal community in which you find yourself. And so it's a great opportunity for law students to get some really strong experience to take home with them during their time in an LLM program or a JD program in the United States. Law student life is also a little bit different perhaps than it is in other places. So we have a pretty rigorous amount of reading, research, and writing. Our law students work very hard while they're in law school in the United States. One of the things that I think is challenging sometimes for students who are adjusting to the system that we have for legal education is there's never a right answer. The answer is always, it depends. And that makes it really challenging when you're trying to learn, well, what happens if this is the situation or something else is happening? What is the law? What is the answer? It depends. It's very nuanced. And so it makes it very interesting and very rich as a field to study, but it's also a tough one. So this is a field where you need to be ready to really engage and think and focus. We use the Socratic method for most of our lectures, and you can see a photo of a classroom where that's happening. You see the professor is in the center of the room, and she's very, very engaged. She's not just lecturing and telling students what to do, and then they're memorizing it and writing down notes of exactly what she said, but they're actually having a conversation. She's asking questions, they're asking questions, and it's through that process of conversation and discussion that we teach the law in the US and what we call the Socratic method. There's also a competitive assessment. Most law schools are graded on a curve, which means there's not a matter of how much are you absolutely getting right, but how are you doing compared to your peers. And so that, again, can make this feel like a very rigorous academic program.
Great, thanks, Jessica.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about selecting the right program, and I'll just give some general broad strokes, but I highly recommend that you engage with your Education USA professionals. They are wonderful resources to you as you're beginning your journey. But just a couple things I think students should consider. I always tell them to put together a matrix, kind of like an advanced pro-con sheet, but really look at different factors that are going to be important to you as you're looking at different schools. And in the US, we have a lot of friendly colleagues here in the area. So if you contact me and I don't have something at my school, I might put you in touch with Jessica or somebody else in the field. The legal community of education representatives is quite friendly and quite diverse. So when you put together your matrix, I think you need to ask yourself questions about how you like to learn, the environment in which you like to learn, and what kind of access to opportunities you're looking for. So usually number one on everybody's list is cost. But sometimes it gets a little confusing. What does cost mean? Because of course there is cost of tuition, but there's also cost of living. And then there's also cost of opportunity. So what I've put here is lots of different components, and this is by no means exhaustive. I think the Education USA advisors can help you think of other variables that you might want to include. But these are the big ones when I counsel students who are looking at school. So cost of tuition would include the amount that you pay for your classes. There'll be some mandatory fees that are included at all universities. Things like the tech fee so that you can access technology. There might be an activity fee, all of those types of things. There are some fees that you can opt into, such as the gym at my university. You don't have to pay for the gym unless you want to use it. But there are some fees that you cannot opt into that every student has to pay for. So I think when you get your first bill, sometimes that's confusing. And then the way that tuition is charged obviously is also different at every school. But again, something that once you see the first bill, you get a little bit better idea of how to read it. But there are also scholarship opportunities. And I think sometimes this can be very confusing. I'll show you on another slide some ways to think about that. But if cost is a big factor for you, as it is for most international students, the first three here are kind of important to consider. Are there fee remissions? Are there scholarships? Not only at your school, but are there external scholarships you can apply for, such as the Fulbright program? I understand that there's going to be a session for you through Education USA to learn more about the Fulbright. I highly recommend that you do that. We have several Fulbright students at our school every year. Cost of living, that means relative to other places, how much does it cost to get an apartment? How much is your grocery bill? Those can vary widely, not only within the United States from state to state, but even within a state from different cities around the state. Career opportunities. So all law schools in the United States that are accredited by the ABA should follow certain regulations about having opportunities for externships and bringing in different groups to interview students, but the opportunities can look different in different places. The United States is a big place. So geographically, I'm in the center of the United States so that I'm not near water. So for example, if you wanted to do maritime law opportunities, that wouldn't be something you would do at my school. So when you look at different opportunities, things that you want to do, looking definitely at the professional development office to see what kind of externships they have and specialties in law, that's going to be a big one as you are considering what type of law you want to practice. The size of the school can also vary dramatically. I happen to be at I think a large law school. I'm definitely not the largest, but I have 800 in my school, and I'm the largest law school in the state of Indiana. We have a variety of programs, but doesn't have to be. Sometimes there are smaller programs, sometimes there are larger programs. So you have to think about the type of the size. Does that matter to you? And if it does, put that on your matrix so you can decide whether you're looking for a large school where you have lots of different opportunities, or maybe a smaller setting where you're going to have more intimate opportunities. Type of program for sure. In the United States, particularly in LLM programs, that can look very different. Some programs are integrated. They'll integrate the international LLM students into the life of the law school, directly into JD classes with other JD students. Some LLM programs, you're completely separate. They pull you apart and you have all tailored LLM courses. And then there are programs that fall in between. That'll be a hybrid of both. Access to faculty, in general in the US, access to faculty is a lot higher than you're gonna probably experience in your undergraduate degree back home. And that's because of the method that Jessica was just speaking about. They really want you to engage with your faculty, not only in the classroom, but outside the classroom. They want you to come, they want you to talk through your questions in law. It's really an activity in legal reasoning. Even inside and outside of the classroom, they want to engage with you personally on those matters. And then international students and faculty. Sorry, my slide is jumping. Let me fix that real quick. So you're going to want to look and see what does it look like? Are there lots of international students? Are there lots of faculty that seem to have an international background or experience? And how important is that to you? Do you want to be at a school where it's very American and there's an intense American experience there, or would you like to be someplace where there's a good mix of international expertise as well as American expertise? And I would say most law schools now have a good mix of both, but you can certainly look through the websites. You can, a lot of law schools in the US will give you hints about different things. Lots of information that you can get from the websites and of course from EducationUSA as you're looking. But I highly recommend the exercise of putting a matrix together. I guarantee you one school is not going to be perfect on all fronts, but when you compare them side by side with what's important to you, you'll be able to get a better picture of the schools that you should maybe apply for. So this is the one slide I always like to show students because it's amazing to me how the math can get confusing for law school students. I know we're not math majors when we study law, but something to consider if cost is important to you. Again, not only is the scholarship important to consider, but the total tuition and cost of living. So many times when I speak to students and they have a huge scholarship from a school in a big city, maybe in New York, for example, that's going to give them $20,000, they're really excited. And they're looking at another school that meets a lot of their criteria that might be in a smaller city that's only giving them $5,000. They think, oh, well, school one, university one must value me more. It's going to be better financially for me because they're giving me a $20,000 scholarship. So please don't be fooled. Make sure you do the math. If cost is something that's very important to you, then you're going to want to line up at least these three: total tuition, scholarship, and cost of living. And again, I'm sure your EducationUSA advisors will be helpful in getting this information for you, especially cost of living. There's some websites that'll be helpful. But when you do that, when you line them up on the matrix, then you can see the difference is actually double at University One. Even though the scholarship was more than double, the total cost to you is going to be more than double of University Two. So again, if cost is an important factor to you, make sure you do the total math and not just the math on the scholarship. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the application process. And in general, most law schools follow sort of a basic application process, but there'll be slight differences. So I'm going to talk in general about basic application components. So there is an application form that you'll fill out, and that will have basic information about where you studied, all universities that you've been to in the past. Even if you didn't get a degree, you'll be required usually to submit those documents. They're going to want to see official transcripts and degree certificates or diplomas. Many times you can get a review of your application with unofficial documents, but before application materials are sent to you, and certainly before I-20s for visa purposes, they're going to want to see official documents. And each school is kind of different about when they want to see certain things in the process. But that'll be your basic application form, basic information about yourself. They'll ask for, like I said, the transcripts and diploma certificates, particularly if you're from a school that does not show graduation on your transcript, then you're going to need to also show your diploma certificate. If you are a senior student and you haven't quite graduated yet, they know that you don't have a diploma certificate. That's okay. You send what you have in progress on your transcript. Personal statement. I cannot stress how important this is. A lot of people feel kind of weird the first time they write a personal statement, but in the United States, we're kind of trained at a young age to be very confident and to be able to sell ourselves, which sounds weird, but what they're looking for is they're looking for you to be very confident in your personal statement and talk about your experience. What do you know? What have you been through already? What brought you to the law? What kind of experiences have you had? If you've practiced law for a while, what kinds of things have you done? What are you hoping to gain from a program? You can really show that you've done your research here. Again, if you've done your matrix, you will have some of that information. You can talk specifically about the programs at the university that you think would be a good fit for you. Not only why it would be good for you, but what you plan to do with it, what you bring to the classroom. There's a lot that you can do in a personal statement to stand out. Now, you don't want to write a novel. There's no need to have pages and pages and pages here. Follow the guidelines is my number one recommendation. You're going to have very specific guidance from each university about how long that can be, but you could definitely want to tailor that for each university. If you are applying to 5 different universities, you shouldn't have the same personal statement for each 5, in my opinion. I think you should tailor it for each university to speak to that university and what is going to be drawing you to them. The resume and the CV is a great place to showcase what you've done. Even if you're only a student and you haven't practiced law yet and you're worried about that, you can really highlight a lot of different things on your resume. If you've done an externship or an internship, you can put that on there. If you have taken some classes that are interesting or unique, if you've written a paper or you've been to a conference or you've had something published, anything like that. Even if you think it's little, a moot court competition, you were part of a team that got 3rd place. That kind of stuff is great to put on your CV. It gives talking points for you if you have an interview with the school or a chance for them to really know you as an applicant. The English exam can be satisfied in a variety of ways, but most universities will accept the TOEFL or the IELTS. Some of them will even do an interview. So they'll look at your scores and they're going to want to do an interview on top of that, or maybe in lieu of. Other universities have different options. For example, at my university, we also have an internal language program that we'll accept as well. We'll do ELS, which you have probably heard about from EducationUSA. So a lot of schools will accept a variety of things here. I just kind of gave you a sample. Again, contact the university that you're interested in to see what might meet the requirements for their school. Letters of recommendation is also a really important place to stand out. And people always ask me, oh, you know, if they know the president of some important company or the country, for example, oh, I'm going to get, you know, a recommendation from the president. What I'm going to say about that is if the president doesn't really know you, it's not going to make a strong letter of recommendation. It might be very impressive that you know the president of this very important company, or the president of Pakistan would be very impressive, I'm sure. But again, if they don't have anything to say about you, they don't know you personally, it's not a great letter of recommendation. The best letters of recommendation are going to come from professors or from supervisors at work who know your work well, in particular, who know your legal reasoning. I'd much rather have a letter of recommendation that speaks specifically to your skills, your strengths in legal reasoning, your writing or reading skills, Those kinds of things are what you want to have in a letter of recommendation, because that's what the admissions committee at the university is looking for. How well can you perform in a legal environment, particularly outside of your home country, in English? So choose people who know you well. Of course, don't choose your mom or a relative, that won't work, but a professional letter of recommendation from either a professor or a supervisor who knows your work well is great. A little tip that we do in the United States that may or may not work in Pakistan: when I ask a professor to write a letter of recommendation for me, I provide a little bit of information, a little reminder of how maybe they knew me. I took this course with you. Here's a paper I wrote for you. Remember, I was on your moot court team. Those kinds of things might be helpful hints as you are helping your professors put together those letter of recommendations. Then the LSAT exam, I have a star on that. The LSAT exam is only required for a JD program for a first year attendee. So let me explain briefly on that. I won't go into super detail, but if you are planning to go from Pakistan, your undergrad there, directly into that first degree in law called the JD, the Juris Doctorate that Jessica explained, then you're gonna need a standardized test that kind of is a broad picture of your skills in different areas. And for law school, that's called the LSAT. In general, there are some schools that will accept a GRE, for example, but most law schools accept the LSAT, and it's a test of legal reasoning, not legal reasoning, but a test of reasoning and a couple other components, again, general standardized test that will be required if you're going to be entering as a first year JD student. The reason it has an asterisk is because a lot of schools will allow for that advanced JD option. For example, if you do an LLM degree at the school first and then you want to get your JD degree, that might be waived. So again, this is something to consider. I don't know of any LLM programs that require the LSAT, but most JD programs will. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit. Let's see, I have some questions that I guess I'll answer, Jessica, if that's okay, before we jump into our intros. So a couple general questions. It looks like there was a question about total cost with living and LLM costs. What do you mean by University 1 and 2? Good question. Let me scroll back and just look at that slide very quickly. So University 1 and University 2, those are general names. I didn't put a certain university's name in there. Like I said, we're friendly here in our legal education community, but the cost of tuition will vary widely from school to school. So one school might be $60,000 or more, whereas another school in a different region of the United States might be a lot cheaper. It might be $35,000. Jessica referred to this a little bit also when she talked about the difference in private versus public funding. Sometimes universities too, for example, might get public government funding, so they don't have to charge as much as a private institution. So sometimes you might see University 1 as a private school, University 2 as a public school, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the public schools are also very expensive. It just depends. So when I had University 1 and 2, I was just doing a general comparison here. So total tuition can look very different from school to school. In the same way, scholarships can look different from school to school. You might have a $20,000 scholarship at one and a $5,000 scholarship at another one. So the reason those are in brackets, because I'm going to reduce the total cost at the bottom. And then cost of living, what I did here was general figures. How much would it cost to live in this city for about 9 months? So of course, if you're doing a JD program, you're going to need to multiply these by the number of years that you're going to be there. Keeping in mind, of course, that the scholarship might be broken up over time. But this is what I'd say a classical LLM slide. So a 1-year LLM, tuition at 2 different schools, scholarships from 2 different schools, and then cost of living at 2 different schools. When you add it all up and you subtract the scholarship, you can see that the difference between University 1 and University 2 is almost double, right? You have $70,000 from University 1 because that total tuition and cost of living is so much more expensive, even though the scholarship was more. So that's what I mean here. When you are comparing universities, of course, you're going to replace University 1 and 2 with different names. Jessica and I would love that to be somewhere in your matrix, Indiana University for me and Stetson Law for her, but you might have multiple different schools there. I see another question about the Fulbright, and I know that EducationUSA is going to answer some questions about the Fulbright, so I won't go into detail about that. But the question does say, isn't the Fulbright a fully funded scholarship? There are different types of Fulbrights, and I'm not sure exactly how it works in Pakistan, but for the most part, the Fulbrights that I welcome at my school are fully funded, but it's usually a matching process. So part of the money comes from Fulbright, part of the money comes from a scholarship from the university. So again, I will have Education USA fill in the details there for you, as they know those programs well for the Pakistani student. It says, is there an age limit? I don't know of any law school that has an age limit on consideration for admission. In fact, it's one of the beautiful things about studying law is that we're trying to make it available to a wide variety of students, highly diverse, both in age, background, language, culture. Frankly, we are all part of the mission for global justice. And in order to do that right, you need to have great diversity in the type of student that you admit your school to. So I don't know of any school that has an age limit. And there was a question, is Indiana University University 1? No, and on purpose, I didn't use specific figures from either of our universities here. So again, this was meant to be very general, but we can speak a little bit about our specific universities now, if you like, which is the next component. So this is my university, Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law. That is actually the law building that you're looking at. It's in downtown Indianapolis. So you can see it's got a very urban feel to it. And it is entirely composed inside of the law school. So even though we sit on the campus of Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, which also contains a medical complex and an engineering school, a large university in the center of Indiana. Our law school is self-contained. So all of your classes would be in this law school. All of the activities that we do when we bring in the law firms, we do interviews, everything is contained here in the law school. And that is something that is common among other universities as well, that you would have sort of a hub of activity in your law school. Oops. All right, so a little bit about my law school. You can see all the flags here. Hopefully you see Pakistan, because we had a student from Pakistan the year I took that picture. But this is inside the law school. It's the atrium. There's a lot of activity. I like to show this because I think it's different across the United States, but also across the world. When I talk about it being a professional degree, I truly mean that. There's a lot of professional activity that happens at our law school. We are a very large public institution, not the largest, of course. There are many law schools that are larger, so maybe I'll say medium large. But we have over 800 students because we have 4 different programs. We have the JD program, the LLM program, an MJ, and the SJD. I won't get into details because Jessica's already done that for us. But we have a variety of law programs all within the law school here. We have about 10% representation international student across the program. So you'll have international students in each of those different programs. We also have great representation on our faculty. In fact, our new dean, who is starting July 1st, also has an international background. She's from Jamaica. So we have lots of different faculty who come from abroad as well. What's unique about my school, I think, that's a little bit different than a lot of places, is that we are the only law school in the capital city of Indianapolis. At one time, there was another law school, but it didn't make it. It just survived for a short amount of time in Indianapolis. So the benefit to that is that we have a lot of opportunities in the capital city. We can see the courthouse from the law school. You can actually walk there. We have faculty that walk back and forth to the courthouse. We have Supreme Court justices who teach in our program from the Indiana Supreme Court. So we have a lot of really great intersections with the legal community because we're there. A lot of businesses are headquartered in Indianapolis. We have Lilly, in case you've heard of them recently, because of the pandemic. They're doing a lot of work on developing tests for COVID-19 and those kinds of things, and working on getting a vaccine together that we're all very hopeful that will happen soon. Of course, everybody shares that desire. But because we're in the capital city, we also have a lot of renowned faculty and research centers. So just about any of the LLM specialties also has a research center that goes with it. So the reason that that's important and interesting is because you have outside speakers who will come in. Sometimes the faculty will take research associates, students who are coming from abroad who maybe are going to work on research for them. We have a World Trade Center in Indianapolis that has a lot of interesting research for students to be doing also. At IU McKinney, experiential learning is a signature component, not only for the JD program, but for the LLM program as well. So we have over 350 externships and internships. Like I mentioned, because we're in the capital city, it's a little bit easier to be able to do that. International as well as USA placements. So we have an international human rights law. One of my students, for example, was at an externship in New York last summer. So even though my university is not in New York, you can get placed in different cities. She was at the Amnesty International headquarters. We have 9 law school clinics, like Jessica talked about. That's where you would be serving actual clients under the supervision of an attorney. 3 scholarly law reviews. If you like research and writing, you can do some publishing. We have a moot court, and in your case, you would be invited to the international moot court team, which travels to Europe to compete. And then we have student designed experiences. So if there is something that you're really passionate about that we don't have a class for, you can actually work with a faculty member and design a course and an externship or a presentation or a paper to go with it as part of your experience there. So it's nice. We have a lot of flexibility to meet your needs. These are the 7 different specialties, and these are the ones that we have tracks for in the LLM program. So because most of our international students come in the LLM program, these are the ones I like to show. So the basic American law for foreign lawyers, international comparative law, intellectual property law, corporate and commercial law, which is our most popular, again, because we are a hub in the capital city. We have a lot of interest in that one. Health law, policy, and bioethics is also very interesting to students. Again, we have the medical complex and Lilly Pharmaceuticals and lots of different technology that's going on in Indianapolis. International human rights law, and then the world trade law, which is our newest track. That one has a required externship with the World Trade Law Center in Indianapolis or at a partner World Trade Center. We had a student do one in China. But the rest of them are not required. However, you're welcome to participate in those externships. Sometimes my students do 2 externships because they really enjoy that practical experience. The slides are a little quick, sorry. So this is the LLM overview, 24 credits. You can either start in the fall or the spring, which is August or January for my school. Flexible offerings, we have day, night, summer. Short courses might be a 1-week course. We have online courses if you'd like to do that. We have classes taught by experts, like I mentioned, the Indiana Supreme Court, judges, the Court of Appeals. They are our writing instructors, which is really great because they do a lot of writing at the court. And then we also have the option to transfer to the accelerated JD program that I mentioned. And I think Jessica briefly mentioned it also. That's why you can do a JD degree in 2 years. If you have some law at my school anyway, if you do the LLM program, we'll transfer some of your credit from the LLM as well as your LLB from Pakistan into your JD program. So then you can finish that JD program in 2 years and you don't have to have the LSAT exam in that case because you've already gotten an LLM degree. And then we have a lot of generous need and merit-based scholarships. We have the benefit of being at a public institution, so our tuition is not high. It's very affordable, and then we also have really great scholarships. So I know that a lot of students look at Indiana University because it's economically very feasible and attractive with all of the externships that they have available. We are the 16th largest city in the United States, so sometimes people don't even know where Indiana is. I like to show a map here. I think, Jessica, you're going to know where Florida is when she starts talking. So I'm in the Midwest here. You can kind of see Chicago if you happen to know where that is. That's about a 3-hour drive from Indianapolis, so you can see that there. Because we're the largest school in the state of Indiana and the only law school in the capital city, more than half of the attorneys in Indiana come from my school. So that's really great network for you. If you participate in optional practical training, OPT, afterward, it can make it really easy for you to find placements. Not that finding placements are easy, because that is always a challenge for students, but it can be easier if you come from a school and you work with the alumni. I'm sure Jessica has the same kind of options that, they can connect you with alumni as you're looking for opportunities. So now I'm going to turn it over to you, Jessica.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about Stetson Law School, and then I do see that we have questions about bar exams and about dates for the application cycle, and I'll make sure that Miki and I have an opportunity to answer all those questions as well. So feel free to keep sending them as I'm chatting, and we will respond. So Stetson University College of Law is located in St. Petersburg, Florida. And so this is just a couple of pictures of our campus, it's a kind of interesting campus. This campus was originally built as a resort hotel about 100 years ago and was converted into the law school when Stetson Law School came here into this physical space. And so we are really lucky to have just really beautiful grounds. And so those are pictures of our law school. Can you, yeah, it's okay. Perfect. So there's some interesting attributes about Stetson other than just the buildings, which I think are really nice. We are the oldest law school in Florida. So we were in fact the first law school in the state of Florida, and we have been operating since 1900. Stetson Law School offers LLM, MJ, and JD degrees. And similar to what Miki was saying about Indiana University, we have a 3-year degree, JD, the traditional one. We also offer a 2-year degree for students that have prior legal education. We don't require that they have an LLM from Stetson in order to be eligible for the 2-year degree. Obviously, it helps. It makes you more competitive if you have an LLM, but it's not a firm requirement. Our school is really well known for its skills, right? So we're ranked #1 in the country for trial advocacy and #3 for legal writing, which are together sort of the core skills that good lawyers have when they go into practice, how to advocate both orally and in writing. And so those are things that receive a lot of emphasis and a lot of strength here at Stetson Law School. Our LLM is in international law. And we have a really interesting opportunity in that we are one of only a few law schools in the United States that shares space with a working court. So we're not located in the state capitol. We don't have that advantage that Indianapolis has. However, our law school building shares space with court. So court holds session in our law school, and our students have the opportunity to observe court or to participate in working with judges or to having those sorts of opportunities. And that's something that is very, very unique within the legal education system here in the US. All of our LLMs are guaranteed an externship placement. It's actually a graduation requirement of our program. You'd have to receive special permission not to do an externship. And so our students take advantage of working with lawyers and law firms and legal organizations and foundations in the area and find that to be a very rewarding opportunity to learn more about the legal system and just how it actually works here in the United States. In our JD program, we have concentrations, certificates of concentration in advocacy, elder law, environmental law, international law, and social justice. And I know that many of you viewing this presentation are probably interested in an LLM, but I think it's worth noting those are the areas of strength generally in our law school. And so you see that mirrored in the certificates of concentration for the JDs, and those are lots of the course offerings and types of opportunities that are available here. We are a relatively small law school, so a little bit different than what the offering that Miki has. And so we have a small law school. We have about 600 or 700 students total. And within that law school, we have about 45 student organizations. Our students participate in national and world champion advocacy teams, in social activities, in sporting events, all kinds of things together. There's a very wide variety of clinic and externship opportunities. And we also have 6 study abroad and foreign exchange programs available to our students. And the study abroads are available to our LLMs if you wanted to do that. So you could come here for an LLM and even get another experience in a third country if that were something that were of interest. I wanted to give you a picture of St. Petersburg. I think we're just really lucky to be in a beautiful location. So this is actually a photo of downtown St. Pete, St. Petersburg. We call it St. Pete, and you can see we've got beach and palm trees and a vibrant, robust downtown area. And then the flag at the bottom of the screen, that's actually the flag of our city, which I love looking at because it's got a pelican and it's sort of, we love being on the beach. And so that's something that's part of who we are. And then finally, I wanted to show you a little bit more about Stetson Law School. So the aerial photo you see, that's actually the law school. All the buildings there with a red roof are part of the law school campus. Stetson University as a whole university is located in DeLand, Florida, which by car is about 3 hours away from the law school. So we're not on the same campus as the rest of the university. We are on our own. We are separate and apart. And as a small law school, it creates a really nice community feel. It's definitely a different environment than what larger universities have. I think you know, both are great. It depends what your preference is, but I do want to highlight this is something that's special and different about Stetson. And we also offer dormitories for our students. I know that housing can sometimes be a little bit intimidating for students when they think about going halfway around the world and how they're going to figure out all the logistics. So we do have apartments near the campus as well as dormitories actually in the law school. The picture you see with the pool is actually the student center. That's the dormitories. So that is on our campus. That's part of the law school. That's where our students live, and that pool is part of our campus. So it's just a really lovely, lovely place to be. And then the last slide. Where are we? So I think people have heard of Florida, and they probably know Disney, and they might know Miami. St. Petersburg is not as well known within the state. So we are that little yellow square. We are the western coast of Florida on the Gulf of Mexico. And that little peninsula that's yellow there, that is St. Petersburg. And so that's where we're located. And then I gave you a picture of a manatee because they're my favorite creatures. And they live here in the waters right off of St. Petersburg. So I hope that this has been helpful to learn more about our schools and about the program. Our contact information is here. Let me take the bar questions that I think have come in, and then see if Miki has anything else she wants to add. So we got several questions about does the LLM prepare students for the bar? What are the qualifications? If I just have my LLB, can I do this? Kind of how does this work? So if you have an LLB degree, or you're in your last year and you're in process of earning your LLB degree, you would be eligible to apply for LLM programs in the United States. And each bar exam, so there's actually 50 different bar exams in the United States. It's a little complicated. Every state has its own bar examination and its own licensing requirements. But for most of them, if you have an LLB from your home country, and you've earned an LLM in the United States, there are about 34 states that would allow you to take the bar in the US. That includes all the ones you're probably thinking of. So that would allow you to be eligible to sit for the bar in New York, in California, in Washington, DC. There are some courses you would need to take during your LLM in order to make sure you've achieved the requirements that those states have. But yes, having an LLB and then doing an LLM would make you eligible to sit for the bar in most of those jurisdictions. In terms of does the LLM prepare you for the bar exam, it does, in that it helps you learn how Americans think. How does the law system work here? What are the basics and the fundamental courses? But doing an LLM program alone is probably not sufficient. All graduates from US law schools, whether they've done an LLM or a JD, also do, or almost all of them do, these private prep courses when they graduate. They take about 2 or 3 months, and they're very intensive study programs. I would highly recommend them. I think if you did an LLM, you applied yourself, you worked hard, and you studied hard in those 2 to 3 month programs to prepare for a bar, you do have a reasonable chance of passing a bar exam. And that's sort of how they're structured. The expectation is that you would do one of those additional courses, but obviously doing that without an LLM would not be successful. You've got to have that LLM as a solid foundation for your legal education. Before I move to the admission questions, Miki, do you want to add anything to the bar questions?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. And then in terms of admission, I would say every law school has different deadlines. You'd have to check with each law school individually to see what they're doing. I will speak on behalf of Stetson and then turn it over to Miki so she can tell you what's happening at her law school. So at Stetson University College of Law, we are still accepting applications for the fall. The only limitation in terms of timing for us is really just the time it would take to process a visa and get you here. But we would love to have students. We are always looking for more talented students from around the world. And so I'd be very happy to receive your application. Our applications are available through LSAC, as was indicated earlier. And so feel free to apply online or to reach out to me personally if you have any questions about the program or the application process. And with that, I'm going to allow Miki to talk about her application process for a minute.
Sure. We have a rolling process also. We actually don't have a deadline, so it's also driven by your home country visa line, for example. And we do have a deferral process. So if you apply sort of too late to get the visa, maybe it's in July and your consulate's not even open yet to get visas, we do automatic deferrals to the next admission session or further if you like. So I could defer your admission to January, for example, or the following August. So I think a lot of schools would be very flexible. We do not require that you apply through LSAC. You can. LSAC is certainly easy if you're applying for multiple schools. But if you know that you want to come to my school and you don't want to pay the fee of using their service, you can apply actually directly to my school, and there's a process on my website. So if you just email me, I can put you in touch. And that's because we have our own international transcript specialists at Indiana University. We're so big that we can do it internally. But again, if you're going to apply to multiple schools, LSAC can be a great way to do it, because then it's very easy to share your material. So we can take you in either format. And Jessica, I can't actually see the Q&A. So if you see any other questions you want to read out.
I was just checking. I think we've gotten all of the questions from students. Okay. I want to leave a couple of minutes in case anybody else has any others, or in case the Education USA representatives wanted to supplement anything that we've said that we might have not covered completely, but I think we've covered the questions asked so far.
Great. So hi guys. So I actually want to pose a few questions that my advisees tend to ask very frequently. So the first one is, does it look bad to take the LSAT multiple times?
Good question. So I'll answer for my school, and then Jessica, you can. So if you are applying for the LLM program, I do not recommend that you take the LSAT because it's a challenging exam and it's not required. And in fact, it can hurt your application to a JD program in the future because you obviously haven't been exposed to the test very much. So it's for my school, and I think it's similar in other places, you can't erase a previous score. So it's not bad that you have multiple scores, but I will say it's bad to just take it for fun. You should definitely do some preparation ahead of time. So again, if you're looking at an LLM school, I do not recommend that you sit for the LSAT exam. If you're looking for the JD program, do practice tests, do multiple practice tests before you take the actual exam, because once you have one score, even if you replace it, it's impossible to totally erase that score. Some schools might average it or only look at your highest score, but you can't get rid of it at my school. So I'm not sure how it's handled at Stetson.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar. And the one thing I would underscore is the LSAT is kind of a strange test. So for many other standardized tests that are used for different academic purposes, if you get a question wrong, it's just 0 points. You just don't get points for that question because you didn't get it right. On the LSAT, the way that the scoring works is if you get a question wrong, it's actually negative points. So taking a test just to see how it is and just guessing, you really will end up with a lousy score. And as Miki said, those scores don't go away. So it may be that, and I think we look at your highest score here at Stetson, but we're still going to see those low scores. And it's really difficult to not have that impact perceptions that people have when they're reviewing your admissions file. So if you think that your score is going to go up, you've worked really hard, there's a really good reason to take it or to take it multiple times, absolutely do that. Don't be afraid of doing it. Many people take it more than once. I took it more than once when I went to law school, but I wouldn't make it your hobby or something to do for fun.
Thank you. What advice would you give to a student that's been waitlisted to a school?
So I'll go first, and then we'll see what Miki says. So I think if you've been waitlisted, so I have some general advice and some sort of advice in the era of COVID, I guess. So my general advice is if you've been waitlisted, I would, try to find out if the school is interested. They have these, they're called letters of continued interest. Would they like to receive that? Is it a school you really want to go to? Is it your first choice? If you're waitlisted at a school that's your dream school, it's okay to tell them that, right? Like there's nothing wrong with telling a school, hey, dear Miki, I see that I'm waitlisted for your school. Your school is my dream. If I were admitted, I would definitely come. I really hope I'll have the opportunity to be a part of your program, right? But only do that if that's true. You can't say that to 4 different schools. They can't all be your first choice. So you want to be thoughtful in what you're saying and truthful. It's okay to say that, but I would say it once. I wouldn't follow up with a school all the time, because then you start to become a nuisance for the admissions office, and that's never how you want to be known in the office. I do think that given the uncertain times right now with the global pandemic, there is potential to have more waitlist movement than we've seen historically. I think that there will be students who, for a variety of reasons, will choose other options. Either they will defer, or they might not be able to get visas, or schools might just want to have more students coming in because they're worried about being able to have a class. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the marketplace and what's going on. So I do think if you're on a wait list this year in particular, your odds are probably better than they've been in the past. But of course, these are really unknown times. And so I don't have any hard data on that because we're all kind of figuring out what this looks like as we go and as this pandemic progresses and hopefully gets better throughout the world. But don't lose hope, I would say.
And I would say much of the same thing. The application season was kind of truncated here in the United States because of when the pandemic hit. So the decisions that were made before February, I would say, were kind of classic and traditional. Post-February, it was completely different. So this is a good year to get off the wait list. But again, communicating directly with the school is what you want to do, but not in a harassing fashion. One very well-written email can go a long way.
Thank you. So just one last question that we get very, very frequently actually is choosing a 2-year JD versus a 3-year JD a feasible way to minimize cost, or is the longer program worth the extra year?
Jessica, I'll have you take that and then I'll give my opinion.
Okay. It's a great question. And I love that students are asking it because it tells me that they're being really thoughtful and purposeful in their decision making. So like a lot of answers in law school, I think the honest answer is it depends, which I know isn't very helpful. So yes, obviously doing a program for 2 years instead of 3 years, it should seem less expensive, right? Because you have a full year less of costs. And so that looks very attractive. Of course, the opportunity costs are less. You're out of the job market for 1 year less. That being said, I am aware of several schools that offer smaller scholarships for the 2-year program than the 3-year program because that's built into the calculation that you're already paying less for the same degree. So you'd want to compare length of program, but also scholarship opportunities because you might find that the total out-of-pocket cost could be the same or even less for 3 years than for 2, depending upon the school. And the other thing that I think has to weigh into the decision-making is what are going to be your opportunities when you come out. So depending on what you want to do when you graduate, if your goal is to go back to your home country to get a great job at a multinational law firm or a company, I think the 2-year degree is excellent. I don't think there's any real downsides, and I think you'd be well served with that program. If your desire is to stay in the United States, most law students receive offers of permanent employment based on summer internships, and you have one less summer as a 2-year student than you do as a 3-year student. So that makes the opportunities for the exposure to those jobs less. And I think the job market is always been difficult for international students. And I anticipate that it's going to be much more difficult for everybody in the coming years as our economy tries to recover from the pandemic. And so those are the things I would think about.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I was going to say is that the trade-off sometimes on paper, again, putting the matrix together, cost might seem to be less, but like Jessica said, a lot of schools will build that into their calculations when they offer you scholarships. And then I can't reiterate how important it is to participate in the externships, the opportunities in the summer, all of that you get an extra year if you do the 3rd year. However, the LLM can be an interesting way to start either of those processes because you can come as an LLM student, you can do the year as the LLM student, and then you can decide we don't force our LLM students to do the 2-year program. They're welcome to do a 3-year program with us, or they have the option of doing the 2-year. So I sometimes say start with the LLM because it was designed for international students and it gives you an opportunity to really learn American law and a specialty in a short period of time that helps you make a decision on, okay, do I want to stay here? Do I want to do a JD? Now I have the option to do a 2-year or a 3-year JD. So while it might sound kind of weird, I do recommend considering the LLM first. It's designed for you. And then jumping into the JD because you also have your feet wet because the JD has the competitive assessment that we spoke about. A lot of LLM programs don't, or they have a variation on that. So don't throw out the LLM, even if you're thinking about doing a JD. It can be a really great way to then decide whether you're going to do a 2-year or a 3-year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, there's just one last question that that came through the tension. You have already addressed this, but someone is asking, is an LLB degree from the UK also a good? Is it also a reasonable background for someone applying for an LLM in the US?
Yes. Yeah. First degree in law is a LLB, that would count. And some schools, they even allow other degrees as long as that degree would make you eligible to sit for a bar exam in your home country. So there might even be some opportunity for people without an LLB, but my school's pretty traditional. They want to see the LLB or a law license, and with some kind of modifications on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Okay. So we are at the hour mark now. I want to once again just thank our attendees and our panelists for their patience at the start of this webinar. Thank you so much, Miki and Jessica, for your extremely informative session, and for your guys' rapport really had a great flow throughout. And this webinar is going to exist in posterity and will be something that I personally frequently ask my advisees to refer back to, because you really did hit all the big questions. Just once again to reiterate, we are Education USA. We are your official source of information on the US higher education system. We have 3 offices in Karachi, Islamabad, and Lahore, but are available remotely to anybody from Pakistan applying to the US for any sort of degree program. All of our advising is free of cost, and all our advisors are US graduates themselves. So just once again, thank you to our panelists, thank you to our attendees, and have a good morning and have a good evening.
Excellent. Thanks. Nice to meet you all.
Bye-bye.